to me, that is where the magic really happens. And again, I might be talking in a way that listeners might be like, that's not me. Well, it's not you today, but that might be you tomorrow. That's when email becomes magic. The problem is, though, today, as you know, a lot of email today is still garbage. It sucks. It's not good. And so it's really hard to break through and differentiate yourselves. Bottom line, I would say like 80% of what we create and come up with has absolutely no value to a client or to myself.
Hello, I'm Dustin, PolyInnovator. Today I'm talking with Damon Didier on the Poly Tools Creator Spotlight. He is an e-commerce founder, sales amplifier, email marketing master. Thank you for joining me on the Poly Tools Creator Spotlight.
Thanks, Dustin, for having me. I'm excited to be here. Can't wait to talk.
Well, and we had already chatted a little bit before the call about like knowledge management tools, just kind of nerding out about it. So we got that ball rolling now. One way I do like to break the ice is to have something like maybe about your history, or I have people share something about themselves that they may not know about you. But I think for you today, I think the biggest thing is, what do you really hope people get out of this call?
I think if anything, maybe people can learn from my journey, my good and bad, and maybe they can find some inspiration or some shortcuts to learn from some of the things that I've tried and failed miserably at. And maybe just find some likenesses. I always say the journey of me is the journey of you. Maybe just learn a few things along the way from my experiences. We'll see.
And I think that's great, because I think it's really kind of the same mindset of what I had when I started the show. I wanted to talk to content creators of all types, from streamers, the YouTubers, the email marketers, everybody in this content world, because each person has their own different angle to it. And email marketing's been around for so long, so there's a lot obviously there. Let's start off with what got you started as a content creator.
Frankly, as a kid, I was always into computers. I was doing programming. I'm a bit older than you. I'm in my mid 40s now, but I loved programming. And then as I got older, I got into a band, and actually, here's my bass guitar right here. So, creating and making things, there's just nothing better than creating something new and novel that no one else has experienced before, right? And over my life, it's taken many forms. But when I got out of college, I was always been a computer guy. I was developer and making websites when the web was just a nascent thing in 1994. And over time, I out of college, I went into retail. And during my time in retail, I was always looking for edges, and I always looked for technology to be my edge. So that meant using a Palm Pilot, a Handspring, using different tools online. I went to Franklin Covey, which you talked about a minute ago, to kind of get that. To get that and give me an edge of organization and everything else, because I'm one of these people with my mind that's all over the place. I love to create, but also there's the real world where I've got to also get down to basics and get some things done. GTD, right? And then over time, after my retail stint left, I went into marketing. What I love about marketing is the ability to use data and information to creatively influence people and to make them do things, not in a nefarious way, but in some interesting ways. So I started my marketing journey about 15 years ago, was director of marketing at a publicly traded company. And then 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to start my own thing. I'd always been on the client side, and then I came over here to the agency side, and I started an email marketing agency that helps lead generation and e-commerce businesses sell more. And in there is a lot of creation. I've got 4 graphic designers today. I've got 4 copywriters. On the email side, I've got 2 bloggers that work with me as well. And that's all creation. And what's changed in me is I've gone from a solopreneur in the beginning of my business and a lot of my career kind of on my own, now into like a collaborative group environment. And what's cool about that from a creator perspective is now we have to find tools that aren't just good for Damon, but they have to be good for everybody. And the team has to agree on it and collaborate. And if the tool holds us back from being our best or causes any kind of friction or delay, that's a problem. And just because Damon likes it, that no longer matters anymore. It needs to be what do my designers like the best? And what do my copywriters want to use as tools? And really bringing that together into an operating system of sorts for my business has been what I've been focusing on for the last few years.
So many different things we could take off of that point there, Damon. I think one of the first ones is that you've been in the computer space for a long time. You've been around technology. You have an eye for it. And 3 years ago was right after quarantine, essentially, too. So you were able to switch over. I definitely talked to a lot of people on my other show back in 2020, 2021 about how COVID was an accelerant. Being in that quarantine, so much opportunity. I started doing interviews in general because everyone was stuck at home. Might as well take advantage of the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I was talking to with someone on the show last episode was email marketing. And after talking to you too, I think that it's very interesting to think about how email was the big thing, obviously, in the 2000s. And that was how a lot of people grew. The start of the blogging. Some people might have started doing podcasting, but it was mainly just like email, the written word in general.
Sure.
And in the 2010s, everyone, all these big creators, Roberto Blake and all them, they always talked about like, oh, you should have an email list. You should have an email list. And a lot of people just kind of ignored it. They just kind of like, yeah, I'll get to it later. Since 2021, 2022, we've been seeing like Beehive and Substack and all these other newsletter tools come out of the woodwork. And I find that like, I think there's a resurgence of email. And I feel like that's something that people don't really talk about enough.
Yeah, on multiple levels. Substack, like almost like the paid subscription newsletter service, has now become a thing. With social media, there was those tools through Twitter that you could be part of a group and like chat it out, verbally. And to your point, a lot of this was driven because of the pandemic, and some of those things have carried on. Some of these things haven't. What I see as the evolution of email today is, in my world, what email has become is an advertising platform, but also it's first party and zero party data. So in a world where people really care about their privacy, where people are waking up to the Cambridge Analyticas of the world, the mining of data that Meta did a lot of, and so did Google, that's third party data. What email allows in my world is a first party permission based marketing to people. So we're saying, you're out there, Dustin, on a website, and you're like, you know what? I want to, engage with this media or this content. Let me give permission to it. So that's where like my agency thrives, is kicking in on that side to say, okay, now I've been given permission. I don't want to abuse that permission. What is Dustin looking for? And so with that first party data, now I can say, okay, what does Dustin's journey look like on our site? What does it look like from his behavioral patterns on the website? What does it look like, and what does he want? Delivering it to you with the right message at the right time. That's when email becomes magic. The problem is, though, today, as you know, a lot of email today is still garbage. It sucks. It's not good. And so it's really hard to break through and differentiate yourselves. But in my world, for e-commerce brands, if we're not able to produce a minimum of 25% of your sales through email marketing, then we're not doing our job right. And there are some exceptions, some weird industries, but by and large, we're anywhere from 20 to 50, 25 to 55% of an e-commerce brand's business nurtured and driven just by email marketing. And that's pretty standard nowadays. So email marketing, in my mind, in many ways, through Substack and other tools similar to that, and what's going on with the data side of things, is kind of in its heyday right now, and kind of seeing a resurgence of sorts.
And what I really kind of keep thinking about as you were explaining that there is the different levels of knowledge when it comes to email marketing. When people first get their foray into it, they're going to play with Substack, maybe Ghost. I use Ghost for my newsletters and my websites, and I prefer it over these other ones out there, even though like Beehive has more automation aspects to it, which is probably great for actual real email marketing. If you want to really upgrade from that, like a newsletter is great, and you have an email list now, that's kind of the baseline there, having a list in general. Then you get up a little higher and you're like, okay, now I have e-commerce products I need to sell. I need to make sure I keep my LTV as long as possible. I need to make sure I keep these customers in as long as possible. You really need to start getting into the tools that actually have systems you can use and start creating these different pipelines. And I'm not telling you, I'm telling the audience here. It's like, sure. It's very interesting to think about. You don't want to over automate everything, but like, let's say you have a cart and someone left the cart, the item in the cart, you want to get them back. Boom, there's an email right there. So many different opportunities.
Amen. And it's like a life cycle, right? If I can have a takeaway for anybody listening, and if you have a web property of any sort, just collect emails. Just start. Put a pop-up up there. Yes, you may not like pop-ups, but I guarantee you, if your people coming to your site are open to the message you have to give them, just collect their emails. They want to give it to you. Give them something of value in return for their email because they're literally giving you permission. They're giving you personal information of their email. So give them something of value and just start collecting emails. So whether you're starting today to do it and your list is a couple dozen people, or you're an old hat and you've got 100,000 people on your list, there's a whole life cycle to it, but you got to start. So my first takeaway is just collect it and find out. I mean, at the end of the day, what I look at with emails, no matter what the size of your business is, when someone comes to your site, they may not always find what they want. And you probably have a treasure trove of wonderful information that is very pertinent to that person. But if they don't find it, they're going to bounce. They're going to go somewhere else. And if you are able to collect that email, you have another opportunity now to push that button and to get them, give yourself a chance to get them to come back with the properly worded email.
And you are a business, like, right? Like, your content is your business. Your whole content production, that is you, that is your business. And the interesting thing is, when I first got into emails, like just learning how to do emails, yes, I was learning a little bit in the e-commerce part of things, but I didn't have any products just yet. I was still making my digital products like courses or books, and I don't have any merch just yet, but I'm going to at some point. I needed to have a baseline understanding so I could be ready when I do have that stuff. But even now, with just newsletters and stuff like that, I make so much content as a solo creator, and I have over 600 blog posts. Someone like you coming to my website for the first time is not going to see hardly any of that, let alone like the top 1%, maybe like the most recent post. Boom, that's it. And one of my main motivations behind email marketing was to create like a curated list. Like, here's the last week of content that I made. There's a tool called Mailbrew I really like. Okay. And it allows you to like put in your YouTube, your blog RSS and your podcast RSS, and every week it'll send you an email of the most recent things in those feeds, which is really nice. And so, like, I feel like there's better ways of doing it, but in case you just need to get started, that's one way to do it. And that's a great way of just having like, here's my most recent posts, boom. Like,
yeah, exactly. And back to the life cycle, you're exactly right. Step one, just collect the darn email. Step two will be start sending emails out, because the problem is you might collect them, but if you're only sending one email out a month, that's not enough, and you will end up going to the promotions folder or spam folder if you don't keep that list fresh. You know, you can use a lot of email services have an RSS syndication service. So if your blog has an RSS feed, you can use that to kind of automate what Mailbrew does or similar deal. That's fine. Just realize though, that's not super curated to the person. Instead, you know, what's the next level? Like, what's the next level of the life cycle? Which would
what
be
tags do they like?
Start finding out what they're doing. If you can start looking at what they're interacting with in your website, you can score them like a lead score. You're like, oh, okay, great. And I use this example. We have a coffee brand that sells all kinds of coffee. And if you ask the owner, he would tell you, you know, my dark brew is my best type of coffees. Well, we lead score, so we know what people are clicking on and what they're doing. And I'll tell you right now, yeah, the dark brew, they have a very quick time to order. It's every 100 days people are ordering. But the light brew has the biggest lifetime value. So if we're going to be looking at how do we create content and drive business, let's try to get some more people into the light brew cohort and try to get, or light roast, and to get them more into that one, because that might have more opportunity for us to drive more sales. So it's just one of those crawl, walk, run things where you start here and you just build onto your stack and go from there. I think the only limitation would be is what tool are you using for your email? Because some of the email tools are great at some things, some are good at others, and you got to kind of look at that and eventually maybe move if it comes down to it.
Segmentation is really hard, because I know some tools do it all right, and then some tools do really well, but they only do segmentation. They don't really do blast super well. And it's always kind of a give and take a lot of the time. So hopefully you can find one that's really good for you. And I actually have a note here about the light, medium, and dark roasts, like something to ask you about that. So thanks for bringing it up. And that kind of brings me back to the point too, where it's like my content ecosystem, for example. I have my main personal brand, knowledge management stuff, the sub brand that we're on right now, Poly Tools, which is around these different creator tools and creator journeys. And then there's the gaming brand, and then there's the swimming brand. There's a lot of different I'm polymath, like, what can I say? But like, the point is, a lot of different segmentations.
Yes. I think what's important is you can't spread yourself too thin. And let's be realistic here. Like, you've got 4 or 5 different sub brands. There's not enough time in the day to make emails for all of those. It's just not worth your time, effort, energy. And I would think that, going back to my coffee example, some of those people that like dark roast also like the light roast, right? So some people that like your content around swimming may like your content around tools. There's a lot of overlap. There's the same people. Heck, Dustin, that's why you created all those different sub brands. It's something that interested you. So you're just trying to find, the journey of you is the journey of your people. So it's like finding those people. I'm not saying necessarily that you go super deep into just one and create unique newsletters, but I do believe that you find an email marketing tool that allows you to, at scale, very quickly create those segments, know what's going on, and then scale it up. You'd be surprised if you put metrics behind your different sub segments that maybe the swimming brand, just making this up, may not be worth it. Maybe you're like, man, there's just not a good return over there. I don't think I should be spending as much time over there. Whereas one of your other tools you might have, not thought was very good, all of a sudden you're like, ooh, like those people are spending more money, or they're engaging with my site more often, or they're what we call it our win score after our company name, but our win score is very high for that one. Geez, I had no idea. That's surprising to me. That influences which direction you're going to spend your time, effort, and energy going forward. So I think a lot of this, I'm not suggesting to anybody out there that you segment to the level of separate newsletters, but I do think when you think about like a primary, secondary, and tertiary message in an email, maybe that hierarchy is just is changed based upon what you're seeing in some of the data and facts on your website.
Well, and it really just depends on what kind of content you make. And my whole basis is being multidisciplinary, having these multiple different brands. But it is hard for me to manage all of them and that kind of thing. There's a whole bunch of different lessons we can go into that. But I talk about a lot with these phases. I talk about it with the knowledge management. Like you have different phases, which are different focuses at a certain time. And you don't want to spread yourself too thin. Sometimes you are working on multiple different phases. But most of the time you might be focused on one and sowing the seeds for the next one, keeping the flame alight for another one. But those are a very minimal amount of time effort on those. And 80% of your time is on the main one. It really just depends on what you're doing there. And basically, once I finish the swimming book, all I have to do basically is keep doing some like automated marketing, and on top of that, have a couple of different posts here and there. So like that phase will end. But I get what you're saying. I just wanted to point out like that one's kind of a temporary phase. I just got to get the book out.
But it might be the next big thing. Like you never know if one of these like big bets is going to turn into the new main thing. And also too, like as a solopreneur and into a small business, like sometimes you just lose interest in something. I mean, it happens to me. It's like, all right, like for me right now on my journey, to be completely transparent, the creation of emails, I still review the emails that go out to my company. I critique them and give feedback, but that doesn't interest me anymore. What's interesting to me is the data that we find. And it's not like individualized data. It's of course, the first party data that people have given permission on, but it's that light roast, dark roast, medium roast, and saying, how can we take what we're learning here and employ it into an activity to help grow this client's business? That's what's really exciting to me. And, AI has made that even more exciting, where we're able to plug in data sets into, a GPT and ask it questions on it. And then suddenly now we're getting greater insights on, August 2023, best time of day of week to send a darn email. And like, that's the level that it really kind of interests me right now. And
you're a nerd about the data.
Yeah. I mean, why not? Like, that's fun, right? It's like, it's because, and I had an argument with but a disagreement with a client recently about data. And they told me, Damon, there's no such thing as too much data. And I'm like, you know what? There is. The problem is that there's no shortage of data in our lives today. What's the fact about like these new neural nets from Tesla? It's like they think that like a terabyte of data or something per day is being created from some of these cars, or they will be very shortly. And sorry, that data is not all valuable. Only a subset of it is. And of that subset, you've got to be able to make an inference, make an intent, or figure out what it's all about. And our human brains are only so good at that. So that's where my interest is. It's harvesting all the data that we've got available to us, and to say, okay, let me merge and pivot that data with this data and this data with that data. And then is this coming up with something? And Dustin, bottom line, I would say like 80% of what we create and come up with has absolutely no value to a client or to myself. So it's hours and hours wasted. But along the way, we end up finding some insights that we weren't maybe necessarily looking for, thought was very important. And all of a sudden it comes up and you're like, whoa, like, look at that.
The lessons you learned were valuable, but you don't necessarily have to keep that old data at that point too. And I think a lot of people get a little too sentimental with data and information. We were talking about knowledge management tools beforehand. And one thing I learned from moving between tools was that I had a database, a Notion. So like the 100 items in that database were essentially 100 different pages. So there was a lot of data there. But in actuality, it was mainly just the names of each line that really mattered. So when I moved it to like Obsidian or something like that, I could put it all on just one page and have a list. And then you decrease the amount of data just by being more efficient. So keeping your mindset on information architecture is really key too.
Amen. Absolutely. And, think about it with a team. So imagine your moves from one tool to another one, ultimately to Obsidian, but now having, like, I've got 19 people that work with me. So a team of 19 now, like, and getting them to move across to each one. It's like, holy geez, it's impossible, like, to get everybody completely in line. So that's why, choosing the tool, choosing the architecture, making it simple. Like, I don't know about you, but I have a very bad habit of making things overly complex because I'm always thinking about, oh, well, what is this exception, that exception? But those exceptions only happen, it's the long tail. Who cares? It's more like, the 80, Pareto's principle, 80% of the time, this is a perfect deal. Let's keep it simple. And on those exceptions, we'll manage that as it comes. Because I'm dealing with disseminating information to 19 people to get something done and getting them all in lockstep. And inefficiencies are bad outcomes for our clients and for their customers and everything else. So all of that is thoughts I think about all the time when implementing and working through our stuff.
It's a good lesson for people to hear. And given your background with email and just like SEO, you have a lot of written kind of experience at this point. You obviously are pretty good on camera, Damon. And so I'm curious here, out of the 3 content pillar types, the written, audio, and video, what is your favorite to make? Because even though you spend a lot of time with writing, I didn't know if that would be your favorite.
Personally?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love video, but to be honest with you, I hate the post-production piece of video. And I still, we are using on our YouTube channel right now some tools that are out there. Actually, a tool I think that maybe Dustin you recommended. As actually exactly the tool that we're using to make our videos, YouTube Shorts in particular, which, as an aside, holy geez, they get way more views than the same long form video at this point. So we actually went over the metrics this morning, and I'm like, man, that's like 5 times the views we would normally have over this time period by moving to shorts. But I do love the video. I believe video, when done right, can convey more information much quicker, both audio visually, right? And Alex Hormozy talks about that when he does the audio book while he's reading the book at the same time, because you're having that multimodal experience. For those people that are audio listeners and listening to this, I consume a ton of podcasts and audiobooks on my runs almost every morning. And I think that's really good. But my level of comprehension is definitely not as good as a video. And then written, I think, is probably the best method. But who's got time for that? I mean, reading all that. And on the writing side, I'm actually kind of like burned out on writing, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I write so much on my team in Slack. I'm developing all kinds of like pre-arthritic problems.
Oh no.
Hand. I'm sick of it, man. So I use my Mac's dictate quite a bit right now. And I've got my Chat GPT app in my Mac here and just talk to it as my assistant, because I'm just kind of done with it. But I think, the only downside with video, and YouTube's working on it with their ability with Google search to just jump to a point in a video and to kind of get that. I think there's a lot of really cool things happening there. And that's really the next frontier, I think, in AI, is to continue to hone that and get it better.
Well, Damon, I definitely think you took it in a different direction than I expected, which is really great, actually, because you talked about it in the input and output, so to speak. The question's more focused on, like, what do you like to output? Like, what do you like to make? But I really like how you brought up the input too, because everybody is different. The way you like to consume information is different. Yes, video is a little bit more efficient, but sometimes if you're just a better listener, or let's say you go on walks all the time and you want to listen to a podcast, that's more efficient for you at that point.
Right.
And my blog posts, for example, I have Beyond Words on my website. And so every blog post gets audio versions of it. So you can listen to it either while on the walk or read and listen at the same time. And so that's a really powerful thing there too. Were you mentioning like Opus Clip earlier is what you're talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if I did a name drop, but yeah, that's exactly the one. Yep.
Well, this is a tool show, so like if you have
Why
tools you
not?
want to
Right.
name drop, feel free. Plus, I'm a brand partner with Opus too, so I kind of have to be like a little bit more open about it. But like, I love Opus. It made a big difference for me too. It's interesting you mentioned the metrics because on my main channel, I got 24,000 views in the last month, and I only have like 400 something subscribers. The key thing is with that, 90% of those views, 92% of the views were all from shorts.
Right.
And so it's just like that's powerful. And even on this channel, I was getting anywhere between 12 to 15,000 views, and it's even smaller of a channel because it's still new. And so it's just kind of crazy just how powerful shorts are, at least right now. I think they're going to start slowing down in the next year or so. But if you take advantage of it now, like jump on, come on, guys.
Yeah, I think for people listening, and you and me in particular, Dustin, it's all about time, effort, and energy. And
Mm,
there's only so many hours in the day, so we've got to operate the business, but we want to grow the business. And where is my time best spent to make that happen? And long form video on YouTube, I had all but given up on. I hired a very talented video editor last year. At the end of last year, we made a number of videos, got no traction. And we
mm,
had a commitment and a goal, and we didn't hit the goal. So it was a tough decision, but it's like one where we have to just cut and move on. But now that Shorts is out here, like it's all of a sudden now worth it. And we can take
yeah.
video clips like from this show and reuse those and build it. And I think it's really important that everyone be very cognizant of the time invested in something, and of course the money too if there's a third party helping you out, because you've got to be able to say no to certain things. And I love the idea of writing. I've written my fair share of blogs, and even at night in bed, like in my tablet, writing things out. But
Yeah.
it's like, who's reading this? Is this aligning with my objectives? And finally, kind of going back to Dustin with the direction you're going, is people today are multimodal, and in our lives, we fit in the content type that's best for that moment. When I'm washing dishes, I watch my YouTube videos and catch my subscriptions. When I'm running, I listen to an audiobook or a podcast. When maybe I'm in the middle of the day and I have like a little break, I might read a blog. I love The Verge, so I might read a
Yeah.
Verge blog, right? And so it's important as creators that you're able to meet people where they're at. And that's where like even email comes into it. And kind of moving this back into email, part of our DNA for creating an email is we want to be respectful of our people that are reading the emails, and we want to be respectful of both like their time to get right to the point, but also like neurocognitive load. Like we don't want them to have to think or take a big step when they look at an email. We do everything we can with our graphic designers
Right.
above the fold on their phone to know exactly what this is about, what's going on here, is this worth my time? And then they can choose to scroll and go deeper with it. And it's just because it's just another touch point in the vast 24 hours of our clients' lives that we're trying to break through and get something in there. So I think all of these things are super important, and what works for me may not necessarily work for your audience. It just depends.
Yeah, there's definitely. We'll get back to the email here in a bit. So there's definitely a couple lessons from that I feel like we should point out. The first and foremost one is that you're gonna be kind of burned out on a certain content type. That's why I have that question, the three pillar types, because a lot of times people come on the show, they do want to, they're a YouTuber, they're a podcaster, they're a blogger, or in this case, email, but still that written tree, and your whole history is writing, and so now it might be time to move on to audio or video to keep that fire going. And the other thing was too. Oh crap! What was it? I'll have to cut this out. I had a train of thought there.
Edit and post.
Edit and post. Oh, it was
Going
about video,
multimodal,
video,
changing
video.
aspects.
Something about
Uh,
video. Oh, so the other thing would be is that you oftentimes don't want to give up too soon. So you mentioned how like you had a strategy, it didn't quite work out, and you stopped doing that strategy. YouTube's kind of weird because it does take a while to really gain traction. I've been a
Yep.
YouTuber for like 7 years. I still have not gained any traction very much until this last couple of years. And
Right.
part of that was a lot of mine's my mistake, not executing well enough, not staying consistent enough. And some people say consistency doesn't matter nowadays, but in reality on YouTube, it does to a certain degree.
Mhm.
And now that you're focusing on shorts, at least that's a lot more helpful. And if you go on more interviews like this, I'll send you the Opus clip page. You can have all the clips you want from this episode, for example, and you can post those how you wish. But there's also like longer form videos. Maybe you just do once a month. Like, hey, here's the newest update in email marketing world. Here's the monthly update. Boom. That's consistency. It's just monthly at that point. And I think maybe that like, the strategy you had might be just too frequent or something like that.
But by all means, I agree. The problem always is um, you don't know if, oh, you know what, my next video will catch fire, and now
Mhm.
that'll be the one. So when it came down to budgetary, ultimately in the business setting, there's a cost involved to us creating it, both in my time, the person I
Yeah.
hired, and everything else. And when I looked at that, I bundled it underneath my entire sales activities and company growth. And so the question came after, I think the number was maybe 10, maybe 20 videos. When we hit that threshold, what were we seeing the output or the results that we were expecting, or is that money better moved toward a better sales activity? And we hit that number. We actually went over it a little bit, to be frank, and then it wasn't gaining traction. It wasn't doing what we needed it to do. And yes, I'm sure if I continued right now, we'd probably see some traction. Or right now, I would have
Well, would
been
it be worth
another
it?
few $1,000s in the hole and
Yeah.
nothing. And that's the risk small business takes. And this is completely off topic, but I think it's really important. Is like my business right now, I worked on the operations and the creation of what we do for the first 2 years of my business. And now I'm working on the sales side of my business to grow the sales without me having to do all the sales myself. So I have a small
Mm.
sales team, and it's not gaining traction. So it goes back to the video scenario. It's like, well, what am I doing wrong? Like, so you just have to break down the problem and say, okay, is it the list I'm pulling? Is it the wrong target? Is it the tools we're using? It's the
Right.
same old talk that you're talking about with Obsidian and everything else. It's like, what part of, for some reason, the circle isn't quite circular. What do I need to do differently? And at some point, sometimes you just got to say, I'm giving up. But in this case, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to solve this damn thing. But the point is like figuring out like how this works perfectly, and always working on it. And so I've been spending obscene amounts of time in my CRM on automations, on redoing things, changing messaging, and I was up until 10:30 last night just working on this. And it's the same old thing, whether it's YouTube, blogs, the content you're making today, or whatever. If you've gone as far as you can go, look at what the process is in creating it. If you've done everything you can, you're out of gas. Maybe it's time to try something else, but give it everything you've got, and go from there. So yeah.
It goes back to your data mindset for sure. I think the way you're talking, and like you just said, if you're out of gas, like switch to something else. Here's another thing I was thinking about earlier. I was a lifeguard. That was my first job for the first 3 years of my life or working life. I was a lifeguard,
Right.
and one interesting thing is that you were staring at a pool. You weren't just like sitting there on the chair doing nothing. You were watching that pool with extreme focus to make sure nothing was happening.
Uh-huh.
Your brain can't focus for that long when it comes to like hours and hours and hours. But there was three different zones in the pool, technically more, but three main ones. And what they would have you do is you would switch between each stand every 30 minutes to keep that focus going. Because when you change locations, you focus kind of regained and reestablished itself by switching different content types, or maybe in my case, different brands too. It also reestablish that focus a little bit more. And since you did so much writing in the past, now you can kind of delegation so that we can keep talking about too. But you can kind of switch your focus now personally to making YouTube videos. And maybe instead of making highly optimized or highly edited ones, you just start doing live streaming. So you don't have to worry about editing at all, right? And so you can kind of take the ease off of that. Live streaming is still kind of nerve wracking at first. I'm still actually trying to learn it myself. But the point is, like, you don't have to edit at that point. You can drop those live streams into Opus, and boom, Bob's your uncle.
Yeah, amen. Completely agree. And the live stream is a great hack, right? It's a time hack where Yeah, like one thing we do for our clients is we do open office hours.
Mm,
So some of our clients, we have a monthly meeting with all of our clients, but some clients want more handholding. So how can we do that at scale? Well, we have an hour every Friday where anybody can join us. Any of our paying clients on retainer can come on in and ask us a question. And they get in and get into a queue, and then they can ask and they can hear other questions from other clients and go from there as well. So I think that as we grow and this post-pandemic world where we are kind of still siloed off and all that, we need to find opportunities of efficiencies
right.
like that. I think I've thought about live YouTube videos. We did one a few years ago at my last company I worked at. It didn't turn out so hot, but it doesn't mean that it's not worth trying again. It totally is.
Well, and maybe the structure of it, like you treat the live video as if you were just recording your videos, not so
Yep.
much as like, oh, I'm waiting for people to come in. It's more
Good
like
point.
you're just live streaming yourself, recording 3 different videos. You top out those parts, put it in, boom, put it into an actual short form video or something like that. But
Good idea.
kind of getting into some email marketing stuff again. How important is email in 2024?
I would say today, it depends on the industry, depends on what you're doing. But I believe if you're selling anything to anybody, if you have a message you want to convey, it is absolutely paramount that you do email marketing. Again, we're in e-commerce, and the problem in the e-commerce market space right now is the Walmart marketplaces, the Amazons, the eBays of the world. You're really just a sharecropper. You're on somebody else's property, and the difference between that and owning your own e-commerce store is they own all the data. The email from an Amazon purchase is never transmitted properly to the vendor that actually sold the product through Amazon to that person. It's an obfuscated email that's controlled by the marketplace. And that just goes to show you how important email is to these big brands. Like if it wasn't super important to them, why would they hide it from you? And I believe if you are a business or an individual solopreneur that wants to grow, having that email address is paramount. And let me
Hmm.
explain is on one level, yes, you can email them. That's obvious. But beyond that, that email is a unique identifier of that person. That email could also be used with a bunch of other ones in Meta to find lookalike audiences. So if you want to expand your audience, you can take those emails and say, find me in the open graph 1% lookalikes that look just like this group. So now you can go out there and find new people that were never exposed to your brand to get them to come in. So even if you're not completely sold on the idea of email marketing, I still say collect the emails, because in time you might have one of those moments where you're like, man, I wish I'd been doing this, or a new thing comes out that suddenly becomes really important. And ultimately, like I was saying earlier, the email is a unique identifier. So in our platform, we're a Klaviyo Master Platinum partner. Klaviyo is an e-commerce focused, and it's restaurants now too, but mainly e-commerce focused email marketing platform that does those abandoned carts, abandoned browse, win backs, blah, 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 all that stuff. But what it does is everybody who hits your site gets a anonymized session ID. It's when that person gives you permission by providing their email address that suddenly those two things get linked. And that's
Hmm.
when you can start seeing the person's journey. So I spend a lot of my time looking at buyers' journeys step by step. What do they do? I don't care about Mary Jane as the person. I care though about Mary Jane's experience on the site and what led to her buying that product or becoming part of this dynamic segment that we created. Why is she a high roller with high, RFM scores? Because this is why. This is who she is. That to me, that is where the magic really happens. And again, I might be talking in a way that listeners might be like, "That's not me." Well, it's not you today, but that might be
Yeah.
you tomorrow. And the way to start is to start collecting that email today.
I definitely like learning from people who are smarter than me about different topics too. Because like, even if I don't always fully understand, like I had people on my other show where they might have done their PhD, and so I read their dissertation before coming on the show. And I may not understand plant biology very much, especially in that deep level of things. Might only get like 60% of it, but by having that person on the show, my understanding increases. By people listening in, their understanding is going to increase. They hear terms that they need to look up, and by having that curiosity and those inducing that curiosity, it helps them on that journey. And one of the first posts I made on the PolyTools newsletter was don't put all your eggs in one basket. And while I'm not a very, you know, what's the word, tinfoil hat kind of person, right? I'm not super worried about things. I don't trust most of these platforms. I was on Vine back in the day. I made some of my first content ever on Vine.
Mm-hmm.
I deleted my Twitter at one point, not really fully realizing that I would lose all my Vines after it, like, moved on. It closed. But like basically Vine closed down. All these creators had to move over to Instagram or YouTube or both. And the people people who were able to adapt, survived. But there was a lot of Viners that never survived after that. They just stopped making content completely.
Right.
And I've seen blockchain social networks come and go, and people think that this is the next big thing. Died immediately. TikTok's in the wind right now. We don't know if it's going to leave. I spent a lot of time on TikTok, for example. You put all your eggs in one basket, you're screwed. By having emails, by having that unique identifier, you can bring them back to your home base, and you basically own that data at that point, like you're saying, and that's what's really key.
100%. Couldn't have said it better. That's exactly it. And we none of our customers are nefarious. We're not using this data in any bad way. The tools that are out there, like Klaviyo is a publicly traded company. They're not going to allow you to do anything harmful with the customer's data. It's there. You own it. It's yours. If you ever leave one of these email marketing tools, it's your data. You can suck it back in, put it into a CSV securely, hold on to it. And with it, like again, today there's a number of things you can do with it. Tomorrow, there'll be even more things you can do with it. But when you do leave Vine and you go to Clubhouse and then you go to Mastodon and then you go to Threads, then you're like, how are you telling your people where you're at and what's going on? Well, in my opinion, email is a great way to do it. And in many of those tools, you can upload those emails. When they match, they can become contacts of yours in those tools to help build yourself back up on those platforms. So to me, like that's where email is really interesting today, is in the data aspect of it, the permission-based marketing side of it. Again, we don't spam people. We don't, overdo it. Deliverability is really important to us. We achieve 45% plus open rates. We achieve, 4 or 5% click rates or higher. Obviously you don't want to be a bad actor in this space because you'll get banned and there's laws against a lot of it. Do things above the board. But when you do that, like it's golden and it's a great time to use and embrace email 100%.
I love that. And one thing you mentioned earlier about video too is like the whole post-production kind of thing. I can't stand editing, for example. And you've mentioned Klaviyo, you've mentioned Opus, and these tools help our process as creators and business owners make the job easier. And so one of my favorite questions on this show, especially since it's PolyTools, right? We all talk about tools. What tools do you use for content creation and repurposing?
Excellent. So Opus we use now for video editing. It's wonderful. Great tool. I'm sure there's a link in the show notes that you can go ahead and sign up for it and see how great it is. So in our technology stack, we use Slack for communication. So our designers, all of them are where it's a pro plan. We collaborate quite a bit. And in fact, on top of that, we also use it to share, great email design that we see. We use it to kind of thump our chest about a great email we created to share it with the rest of the company so we can collaborate and get that going, right? And set that culture. On top of that, we use Asana for our project management. I love and hate Asana, but at this point, we're so deeply invested in it, there's no going back. But we use Asana and their new AI tools. I'm finding that in my ownership role of the company to be very valuable because now you can literally ask a question of, what tasks are people waiting on me today on? Right. And it will literally list them out, which is just amazing to me. We do about 800 tasks are completed a month right now in my company. And those are primarily like emails, like one email is an entire task. So, or one task is an entire email. So that's just a ton of content and work that's happening in there. And with the projects and goals, we can slice it and dice it. Don't get me wrong, it's got a lot of problems, but it is what it is. It's our tool of choice. For creation, we use Figma. I like Figma a lot. We used to use Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator, but Figma just makes the workflow a lot faster. I hate Figma's billing. In fact, I'm arguing with them right now. It's garbage. I think they're still going through some growing pains there, but
Right.
as far as the workflow goes, it's amazing. And if you're out there using Canva, if you're a one man shop or one woman shop, got it. Canva's fine, but boy oh boy, you can usually spot a Canva email from a mile away. So we never use that, just not good. And then beyond that, for our blogs and for our writing, we use Google Docs. With our plugins we've got for AI and other things, it's just a great workflow, part of our workflow that we integrate into Asana, and it just makes it super great. So really, the Asana takes an email from brief writing that connects to a Google Doc all the way through, approval to the client, down through the Figma file, integrates right into Asana as well. You can see it right in there and approve or deny or request changes. And it kind of does the whole thing and manages it all. So that's our entire stack.
I love that. Thanks for explaining it all. I think too, like the way you're doing the Google Doc stuff is how a lot of people use like Notion, for example. They'll use like the Notion databases and have that approval list and stuff like that, statuses. And when you mentioned Figma, it kind of made me think. I used Figma in the past for like web design, not so much like email design or picture design. I am a Canva user because I'm a solopreneur, right? I still have to do it myself. But I think that if you're going to use Canva, no, but if you're going to use Canva, though, you have to heavily modify your own templates. You can't just use the generic stuff because, like you said, you can see it from a mile away. I will say, when I have more advanced art stuff I need to do, obviously Adobe subscriptions are completely off the rails. Can't use that. Figma, you just complained about their payment. So one thing I really like is Affinity, which actually ironically just got bought out by Canva. But Affinity Serif is really interesting because it's a one-time purchase, right? And so you have Affinity Photo, Affinity Designer, which is basically Photoshop and Illustrator respectively. And you only have to pay for it once, and it's a nice, powerful tool. And I thought I'd mention that there.
I love Affinity. So I personally use Affinity. It's on my tablet, my desktop. I love it. I will say one thing about Notion, because we've had two discussions now about Notion. my problem with a lot of the project management tools is it might work okay for me, but the issue I've got with Notion is that it's like an everything app. And the problem that I ran into when I tried to implement it versus an Asana. And Asana is like a single purpose task management tool project, then it it rolls up into projects and then portfolios and all that nonsense. But bear with me here. The problem with a Notion is it can do too much. And when you're trying to manage multiple people across multiple time zones, if they're given the ability, the latitude sometimes to do a lot of things, they're going to do a lot of things. And it'll be a month or two until I discover that, oh, great, now they're using Notion, not just for writing the copy for an email, but now they're creating like a quasi database and checklist in there. Well, now we've stopped using Asana. The Asana numbers are no longer relevant. And now I've got two things going on asynchronously, and I don't have a good view of my business anymore because suddenly they're using multiple tools. And yeah, if I was a smarter person, I had all the time in the world, I might be like, well, team, let's talk about which one's better. But at a certain point in time, you have to just kind of say, stop, team, this is the tool we're using. We're going to use it only for this. Let's move on, and we'll discuss this at some other point in the future. And that comes down to like Asana's got messaging tools. So we were using messaging in Asana. Well, when we had messaging for Asana and messaging for Slack, that became a big problem. And email. Right. So we had email, messaging in Asana, messaging in Slack. And the question was like, oh, I told you about that, Damon. Didn't you see it? Where? Where was it? Right. And so it's very important as you scale a business that, at least in my experience, that everyone knows this is where it's at. Slack is for all messaging. Asana, the only messages in there are pertaining to that particular task as a comment at the bottom. And if there's anything else outside of that, it goes back to Slack. And then Google Docs is only there for the brief and brief related content. That's it. And so like, I hate it because I'm the kind of person that likes to be all over the place. But again, if you want to scale an organization, you've got to kind of, put the handcuffs on everybody and go in lockstep. And that's been a big learning experience for me as somebody who loves freedom and all that. But what Jocko Willenick in his book wrote, like discipline equals freedom. Yes. Freedom is when you're disciplined and using particular tools and all that. So
I was just going to say, sometimes people need constraints. Sometimes you need to have constraints because limiting yourself will help you, first off, with creativity, but also on top of that, it keeps you from spreading too thin.
I agree. By the way, you're to edit this out. I have a phone. Someone's
Yeah.
calling my Google Voice, and we've gone over our time. So I think
Mm.
sorry about
Did
this.
we?
My deal, where the heck is it even at?
Oh, because
That's
it's
another
been
thing
over an
too. I'm
hour.
so sick of tech, man. There you go. Stop. I'm sorry about that. I apologize.
I didn't hear anything. You're good. I'm sorry that we went over time. I didn't know if you had a time
It's
limit
okay.
or not. These shows can kind of go a little bit long.
No,
Why don't we ask?
it's fine. But oh, see, now they're double dialing me. Dirt balls. What's crazy is I can't even see
Where's that?
where the darn thing is at, and it's
Well, I can
yeah,
just do like one more question and we can wrap up.
yeah, sure. Give me 1 second for this thing
You're good. You're good.
to stop. It's so annoying.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No problem.
And anytime now, and done. Go
Sounds
for it.
good. Well, one last question here before we end up wrapping up. What do you have coming down the line that you're looking forward to?
Well, for the email world and e-commerce, it's quarter 4. That's our Super Bowl. So I told you earlier, I came from retail. Nothing got me more excited than Black Friday and getting ready for the sales and really driving that. And today, one of the things that's alluring for my business is it's the same old thing. And so our Black Friday, Cyber Monday prep starts actually next month. Where we start getting everything together. It's our plan to have all of our emails created for our clients no later than the beginning of October. And that'll give us a nice breathing room to do any adjustments and everything else. And really, what jazzes me and gets me driven going forward will be just crushing our customers' last year numbers and just finding new intelligent ways to do this. There's a lot of voices that are being heard during this time period, and it's being creative and using all of our brain power to find ways to break through. So that's what's exciting to me right now, and we're working on it as we speak. So yeah.
That's awesome. And also Black Friday is kind of like it's becoming more and more clear now just how big of an event that is, especially obviously in your world there. And we didn't quite touch on SEO much today at all, but maybe the next time I have you on, we can get into that. Damon, if people want to find out more about you, where can they find you online?
Thanks for asking, Dustin. They can just go to winatecommerce.com, just all spelled out, or winemailmarketing.com, same place, to find out more about us. If you want to chat with me or have me look at your email stack, if you click that little schedule an appointment, you will literally be talking to me. Love for you to mention the show so I can give some love back to Dustin. But the plan is just get a hold of me. And as of right now, even though I've got a nice team behind me, they're mainly on the operations side. On the sales side, it's all me. And I'd love to meet you all and talk to you about what your journey is and how I can help.
That's awesome. And I have links for you in the description, obviously, too, for people to find it. And
Perfect.
This is Dustin and Damon on the Creator Spotlight. Thanks for being here.
Thank you again. Have a great one.
Bye.